Hello, welcome to Introduction to Java Programming. In this session, let's discuss about static keyword. Let's begin. So we have seen the static keyword in our previous programs, and we are defining our data members, some of our data members as static. And let's understand this static keyword in a fuller way, in a detailed way. So static is a keyword and we have 12 modifiers. Out of 12 modifiers, 4 are access modifiers. Rest of the 8 are non-access modifiers. Out of the 8, so we have final, we have static, we have synchronized, we have transient, we have volatile, we have strict FP, and we have native. So like that, we have the remaining 8 modifiers. And here static is the modifier which is applicable to variables. So this already we have seen. And whenever we have a static variable, by default, it retains its value. So whenever it is called by a number of functions, the static variable will retain its value. For the function 1, it is 1 and it is updated to, let's say, 10. For function 2, it will be 10. And function 2 updates the static variable 10 to 100. For function 3, the variable will be 100 actually. So the static variable is a variable which retains its value. That is the basic definition. But in Java, whenever you have a variable, static variable, so how do you choose that? Means how it has become static. Whenever you see the common variable of or common value for the whole class, something which is very common for the whole class, you can actually designate as static. That means one value for the whole class. For example, I am modeling an application and I have a person. So I am modeling the persons of India, right? So all persons will belong to a country called India. So India is the static variable because it's common to everybody. Now I am doing a student management system for some company. Let's say some ABC company. I want to do a student management system. So now a student belongs to the company called ABC. So that's a static variable. Okay, so now I'm modeling an employee management system. Employee works for an organization. That organization is a static variable because for all the employees, same organization. Now I'm modeling an application for bank, right? So the bank name is actually a static because for the whole of the bank, whatever I am doing, uh, the common thing will be the bank name, right? So we have some common uh, data which is identified. We can actually designate that as a static, right? And one important thing is the static variables will get allocated separately in a memory that is called class area or method area. So as an example, here in my class student, I have university. I'm doing a student management system, let's assume. So I have an university. This university is common to everybody, every object, right? SID, SNAME, GPA, CT are different from student to student, but all belongs to one university because I am actually doing student management system for that particular university. Fine. So a variable can be static and that we have understood already, and they are going to get stored in the class area or method area. And those values, static variables, will get allocated during the class loading time itself. That means before the main method itself, the static variables will be allocated. So they are given addresses. So whenever they were given physical addresses, the processor will come and execute them, right? And the static variable can also be applicable to method. Okay, of course, static variable can be also applicable to block that we are going to see now, right? Let's now understand the static method. And since the day one, we are actually using the static method because in our main method, we have the static keyword, public static void main. So main is a static method. It was designed as a static method because that main has to be called by JVM. And JVM can call that method with the name of the class, which was given actually for the interpreter. So in order to call a method directly with the class name, that should be a static method. So we can call a method directly with the class name if it is a static method. So main is static. That's why we are actually calling with the class name. So how we are actually calling? So for example, whenever I say here Java student, so what is actually happens, it's nothing but Java space student dot main. So with the class name, I am calling the main method. Who is actually calling here? The interpreter. Interpreter part of what? JVM. So JVM calls the main method when we supply the class name. Okay. So a static method advantage, the advantage of the static method is here I have written. A static method can be called directly with the class name. An object is not required. Object is not required. You can define as many static methods as possible. Of course, in our previous programs, we have written static methods and we have called them directly in our main method. And static, if it is a static method, it can access only static members. A static method can access only static members. That means static data members and methods. And static method has certain restrictions. Static method cannot access non-static data members, cannot access non-static methods. Also, this and super, this keyword and super keyword, this refers to current object, super refers to immediate parent class object. Super is used in inheritance. This and super both refers to object. So that's why this and super doesn't exist in static context. So objects are completely opposite to static. Objects are stored in heap area. Objects contains instance variables which are non-static. So static variables are stored separately. So anything which is related to object will not exist in static. So in a static method, you cannot use this and super. In a static method, you cannot use non-static data. You cannot call non-static methods. You can use only static members. What is the advantage we are getting? So if it's a static method, we can call that method directly with the class name. Okay, that is the second thing actually. And coming to the third, we can actually have a static block as well. What is a block? Block is nothing but something that is between open brace and closed brace. This is actually a block. And we can have a static block, something like this. Static followed by the block. And what we are going to do in a block? In a static block, we are going to initialize our static data members. So in a class, if you have certain static data members and you have not initialized it, then you can initialize them in the static block. So that what happens is the static blocks will get executed during the class loading itself. That means before the main method, your static blocks will get executed. Okay, so that's the purpose actually. If you initialize in a static block, that is going to get executed before the main method during the class loading time itself actually. And of course, the fourth point actually, the static can be applicable to classes also, but those classes should be nested classes. What is a nested class? A class inside other class. So in Java, you can actually have a class which is defining other classes inside it. The inside classes actually are called nested classes. So that can be static. Your top level class can never be static. Your top level class either default or public. But your nested classes, they can be static, they can be private, they can be protected, all access modifiers, and static is also applicable. So a static can also be applicable to a class, then that is a nested class actually. So static is so important. Static applicable to variables. So usually they are common variables for the whole class. One value for the entire class, they are getting stored in the class area or method area. And static method can be called directly with the class name, no need of any object. And there are certain restrictions on static method. You cannot actually access non-static data from static context, and you cannot use this and super over there. And we have static blocks as well, and static blocks are there to initialize the static members. And we can also have static nested classes. Now let's understand the static method, static block with the example actually. So here I am into my student class. So of course I have different instance members, and of course I have a static a variable, and it is going to get stored in the class area, or we can say method area, when during the class loading itself. During the class loading itself. So whenever you say Java space student, first the class will get loaded to class area, and during that time static members will get allocated. Okay, of course, I have a constructor here, and then I have another constructor. This is just to show you that this constructor. And now what I'm going to do here is, uh, here, I would like to write a static method. So what for static method? I want to change this static value. Okay, I want to write a static method. So for that, what I'm doing, I'm saying like this, public void. So I want to make it static, right? So public static void, and I want to use a method called change. So what I'm going to do here, I would like to change the university. Okay, so university is actually Stanford, but now I want to make this university to some Indian university. So let's say IIT Bombay. Okay, I want to change the Stanford University to IIT Bombay. Now student is studying in IIT Bombay, not in the Stanford. Okay, so now this is a static method. Since it is a static method, it can be called directly with the class name. Okay, so for example, what I do here is, so I will create the student object, and that is the first object, and that will have Stanford as value. But after printing this, now I will actually call this method change method. Since I am uh, in the same class, right? So this main method is also in the same class. We can actually call directly change. Usually, how do we call? We will call like this with the class name student dot change. And the same class you can actually call change also. Okay, so this is calling the static method. So now what happens after printing the first student, I am calling the change method. So now the university will get changed to IIT Bombay. And when I print student two, I will be having student uh, belong to IIT Bombay. Let's actually see this. So now I'm compiling this. Yeah, so static method has no issue, it's working. And then when I say Java student, my first student belongs to Stanford, and my second student actually belonged to IIT Bombay. That's what I did. So student.change, I called after printing the first student. So whatever the value is there, that university, Stanford is there. And after that, I'm calling the change method. And I changed the method. So Stanford is becoming IIT Bombay. And then I have other student. When I print it, the university is going to be IIT Bombay. Okay, so what we did here, we have written a static method here. Okay, so when you write a static method, the static method can access only static variables. So university is a static variable and you can access it. And we can change this also, right? So of course, this change we can also write in non-static method. So it need not to be change method, need not to be static, it can be non-static also. So non-static method has no restriction. It can use any of the things. It can use non-static, it can use static. But using static method has an advantage. So you can actually call that static method without the need of object. You don't require to uh, create any object straight away. You can actually call it. So this is about the static method. Okay. So let me tell you about static block also. Let me tell you about static block also. So in order to tell you about static blocks, let's actually change this code like this. Okay. So now I have an university, and that university is not initialized. I have a static variable, but not initialized. Okay, I have a static variable, but it's not initialized. Now, what you can do is you can actually write a static block. That's the actual purpose. You can actually write a static block to initialize the static members if anything is there. And I have a static member which is not initialized. I would like to initialize what is the university. Okay, so now this time I will say JNU, Jawaharlal Nehru University, JNU, Delhi. Okay, so what I'm doing, I have a static variable which is not initialized. Usually that will get initialized because that's common for the whole class, one value for entire class, but it's not initialized. Now, how to initialize it? You can actually initialize by writing a method also. You can initialize by writing a method like this, but this method has to be called you have to wait for the method call actually. Okay, so that means you have to wait for method call means start its execution, and during the main method execution, you have to call that particular method. But if you write a static block, so this is actually the static block. So static keyword is there, and it's a block, open and close brace. So static block. So if you write the static block, what happens? It will get executed. The static block will get executed during class loading itself. So the class loading will happen before the main method. Whenever I say Java space student, student class will get loaded first. During the loading time itself, my static blocks are going to get executed. After that, the main starts actually. So the basic idea of having a static block is to initialize the static variables. The purpose is actually what? To initialize, uh, static variables. So I am actually initializing over here. So I have university, I am initializing it. So now, since I have initialized, what happens during the class loading itself? It will get initialized to JNU Delhi. Now, if we come to my main method, so I have a student object get created. And when I say get student, what is the university? University will be JNU Delhi because during the class loading itself, that means before the main method that is getting allocated. And after that, I am saying student.change. When we go to the student.change method, now for the student2, when I say get student, the university is already changed and it's going to be IIT Bombay. Let's now check this. Let me compile. Compilation is done. So that means static blocks you can write, you can initialize. And when I run actually, now you can see my first student actually. Whenever I created the student, and before the student object is getting created, my static block is getting executed. So that's why that JNU Delhi, whatever I have initialized, is there for my student 1. Now for my student 2, by the time I am creating student 2, I am calling the change method. This is the static method. Now this particular JNU Delhi is changed to IIT Bombay. That's why student 2 will have IIT Bombay. Okay. So this is how actually static blocks are used. If at all you want to write any business logic, you can write. So just now I just want to write something like this. This is a static block. Okay. It gets executed before main. So this is what I am writing. So like that, you can actually write certain business logic also. Okay. So now if I run this program, what is the output? What is the output? Is it s1.getStudent or s2.getStudent, something else? The output will be this one actually, because during the class loading itself, your static blocks are going to get executed. So here one assignment is there and one system.out.println statement is there. So definitely, so this is going to get printed first, then s1.getStudent will come, then s2.getStudent will come. Let's actually check whether the static blocks are getting executed before the main or not actually. Now you will understand. Java C student.java compiled successfully. When I run, now see, so this is static block. It gets executed before main. So before the main method, see in the main method, the first statement is student object creation. Then s1.getStudent. But before that, your static block is getting executed. So you can actually write certain code also there in the static block. Okay, and that is going to get executed, right? So now we have static variables, static blocks, and static methods as well. Okay, of course, we also have static nested classes. That is nothing but in a class, if you have another class with the keyword static, then that is called a static nested class. So static variable applicable to 4, out of which variables and methods are most important to understand. Of course, blocks, whenever we want to initialize and it's not initialized earlier, we can actually go for static block. But static method is something where we are calling that without use of any object, directly with the class name. And static variable is getting initialized during the loading time and it's actually getting stored separately in a memory. It's not with the object. So in order to save the memory, it's separately stored in the class area or method area. So this is about the static keyword, and hope you have understood this static keyword, especially static variable method and the block. Thank you.